Does that sound mean we started?
No, it's on my phone.
Oh.
That was our intro.
Is that our, was that, I think it might have been.
That was on my phone. It's weird.
Let's just make that our intro.
Yes.
Like it.
Excellent. That's a perfect way to start. Whoever is joining, thank you for joining and participating in Judges Night. This is unusual, but exciting. This is I think last night they had Judges Night with the TDC typeface design judges. Tonight we're having Judges Night with the communication design judges, TDC 67. It's our first Judges Night, or second now, that we're doing via Zoom. Usually we had this in an auditorium. Last year was at Parsons, but this year, due to COVID, we had to do it this way. And it's exciting because we get to have people from all over the world. Our judges are international. We have Marta in Spain. We have some people in New York. Leo, who couldn't make it, Leandro could not make it today because he had a job come up. He's from Brazil. But we have people all over the world joining, and it's exciting. I think how this is going to go is I am going to start by asking each of the judges to introduce themselves, tell a little bit about themselves, their story, how they got into design, and how they got familiar with the Type Directors Club specifically. Because I think everyone has a unique, different journey. Even though we're all concentrated in this typographic world, we all come to it in different ways. And I'm super curious about all these judges. I handpicked each and every one of them. They're world-class, top-notch designers. So with no further ado, I want to kick off just by asking Melissa to introduce herself, tell us a little bit about her path into design and typography, and we'll go from there.
Well, hi, everybody. I'm Melissa Deckert. I'm a designer, art director in Brooklyn, specifically. I'm also co-founder of Party of One Studio, which is a collaborative studio that I run with fellow designer Nicole Licht, who's not here, but she's great, and also a friend. And I guess, let's see, my path into design. I started off by going to Pratt. I moved to New York in 2008 and went to Pratt and started off in fine art, and then went into illustration and finally graduated through ComD. And I started off interning, I guess, in a bunch of different types of places and small studios. I worked at a small boutique stationery company. I worked at a large ad agency. I worked at The Onion doing Photoshop layouts of very weird articles that they were doing. So that was— You
worked at The Onion? That's incredible.
I was an intern there. So I learned I basically learned all of my Photoshopping skills at The Onion, putting Joe Biden's head on a other guy's body on a Ferrari.
That's awesome.
So that was a good time. But I guess my first sort of real jump into the design world was I started working at Etsy. I was a brand designer there for about 4 years. And I was there kind of during a really big period of growth for the company. It was before and after IPO, or it going public. So when I was hired, I was, I think, the fourth designer that was hired. It was a really small team. So we got to do a little bit of everything. I mean, anyone who works in-house, I think, knows that you kind of have your hands in all sorts of different things. So we were doing things from seasonal campaigns for the holidays, or events for sellers. So, we would do a lot of expos at the Javits Center or things in different cities, and we would go and we would help set everything up and do all the decorations and all the print design and all the signage. And that was always really fun for me because we got to sometimes create murals for the space and do some of the interior design of the area as well as the actual design components. So I really loved having my hands in a little bit of everything there. And then, of course, there's always internal stuff at companies, doing murals in-house, creating things for teams, merch, t-shirts. So it's a fun mix. And as the company grew, our team got much, much bigger. It almost quadrupled in size, and it became really international. So we were then working with teams in, I think, 12 different main hubs at Etsy, and designing things that needed to be very scalable and globally, work in different countries and different cultures and different languages. So that was a big shift in terms of how we worked, and really a great learning experience in terms of creating really large scalable campaigns.
Mm.
And so I actually met my current partner, Nicole, at Etsy. We both worked together there the whole time. She was actually one of the people that hired me. And we both around the same time ended up leaving Etsy and going off independently. So I was an independent freelancer for about 3 years after that. And really, I think my desire was that I missed having my hands in a lot of different things and making versus just concepting and designing and then handing it off to other really amazing, talented freelancers at Etsy or people that we would hire in. But I started feeling like, oh, I want to do both of those things. I want to concept and design, and I also want to be the one that's designing the photo shoot and art directing it and there in person. So when I went off independently, I was still freelancing a little bit at Etsy. I was working for a lot of other companies and seeing other environments and how different teams worked, and doing a few new types of projects within lettering and logo design, book covers. I did a couple of very big murals that nearly killed me, and but it was a fun time. And I was also working a lot with Nicole, still doing a lot of marketing imagery and social campaigns for different brands. And so that sort of helped segue into the work that we do now, which tends to be pretty photographic. We do, branding and print design and editorial and social stuff, but most of our work has a photographic element to it. So we tend to make a lot of set designs, both large and small, that we photograph, and we'll incorporate tactile lettering or some sort of dimensional propping or something custom that we're building and putting in the scene, and then using that kind of as our base for most of the designs. So that's mainly what we've been doing now. We do a lot of work that is photo based, and we're going into our 3rd year now as Party One Studio. So
that's great. That's awesome. I mean, that's a wonderful intro. I was gonna ask about how you do you think about incorporating the typography before the shoot? So do you have it all sketched out, or is it like, hey, I want to shoot this, and then we're gonna like figure out how we incorporate the typography after? Like, how does that process work for you guys?
It's usually really, really planned out ahead of time. So we'll always send really, really specific sketches of what the typography is going to look like, what the background might look like. The background, I think, is actually the thing that's usually more loose, and we're kind of playing with that while we're actually doing the photo shoot. But if there are any type elements within, or really specific design elements, like for a magazine cover or something like that, where the title needs to be really, really perfectly centered or a certain size, that will always be the first thing that we make. And then whatever scene is around it kind of comes secondary, and we're able to play a little bit more with that and what elements are coming in and how the composition is balanced.
I see.
It's pretty fun.
Very cool. Thank you for that intro. I did fail to mention before how we're going to structure this. I'm going to introduce everyone, but we have a Q&A open for those of you who have access to the Q&A to drop questions in, and I'll do my best to try to ask the judges the questions you guys drop in. But I'm going to continue the intros. I just wanted to make sure everyone who just tuned in knows that they have the ability to like throw questions in, and I'll ask the judges. Next up, I'd love to hear from my friend Jason Ramirez. Fun fact: me and Jason went to college together, and he was one of the most talented people in school. Everyone adored his work. So I'll let you do the rest, Jason. Introduce yourself.
Very kind, thank you. My name is Jason Ramirez. I'm a designer and art director for Viking and Penguin Books in New York. Both imprints are a part of the larger Penguin Random House family. I primarily oversee the Viking imprint, which publishes hardcover books, including fiction and various genres of nonfiction books. Gosh, my path is a little circuitous. I'm from Kansas. I went to college the first time in Rochester, New York, moved to San Francisco for a while, and had been daydreaming about design for quite a while, and decided when I was about to turn 30, I either had to make a decision to pursue the dream or not. And so I moved to New York to attend Parsons School of Design, met Juan, and studied at Parsons for 3 years, and I think it was my last year at Parsons, I took a book cover design course with Gabrielle Wilson, who was at the time a designer with Knopf in New York. And that pretty much sealed the deal in terms of what I would like to focus on, what I wanted to focus on. And fortunately, with her help and like the graciousness of a few other instructors, I was able to meet some individual designers within the publishing field. And I pretty much had the good fortune to spend the entire summer after graduation meeting various designers and art directors within publishing. And toward the end of the summer, I got a call from Rodrigo Corral, and he asked me into his studio. I worked with Rodrigo for maybe a bit over a year. He's probably the one person who's been the biggest influence design-wise in my current design life. And then thereafter, I went to St. Martin's Press, where I worked for about 4.5 years. And then I moved to Penguin, where I think I started at Penguin in 2011 or 2012. And here I am. So
that's wonderful. Yeah, it's funny. As you were telling that story, I remember a part of that because I was a part of that early part of you being at Parsons, and remember some of the work you were making. And it's really great to see both the evolution of your work and how it's evolved, and it's so thoughtful and tasteful and beautiful, but also how it still reminds me of you. It still reminds me of like the nuance and the taste you brought to critiques in class. So it's wonderful to see the evolution, but it's really, really, really nice still being able to pinpoint that your touch on things. So that's really wonderful. How did you get involved with the TDC, Jason?
You know, I think prior to moving to New York, I was aware of the TDC. I was working in real estate at the time, so was not just aware of the TDC by their annuals. Once I moved to New York and actually graduated, it was people like Rodrigo and other people I met in publishing who encouraged me to become associated with the TDC and AIGA and ADC. And for the most part, I've been a member of the TDC since graduation. I think there were a few years where I inadvertently let my membership lapse just out of forgetfulness. But yeah, I pretty much
Carol
since graduation.
Knows. Carol remembers. Yeah.
Yes, no. Carol and I have had many email exchanges about this. So.
Wonderful. That was a great intro, Jason. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to take it over, kick it over to the other Jason who's on. Jason Sfetko. I became aware of your work when you were back over at the New York Times, and then I followed your career over at Nike, and I've been a big fan for a while, so I'll let you take it away.
Cool, thanks Juan. Appreciate you having me here. So yeah, I'm Jason Sfetko. I am a global art director at Nike here in Portland, Oregon. Basically, I'm in the brand design team, so and I'm in basketball too. So everything like LeBron James, Kyrie Irving, all that stuff goes through my department. Prior to Nike, I was at New York Times, like you mentioned, Juan, the New York Times Magazine, and then I was at GQ, Complex, and a couple other magazines. So I was mainly in editorial design before I went to Nike. But a little bit about my journey into my love of typography. What started basically when I was a teenager. I got into graffiti and became obsessed with drawing my name over and over again. And it just kind of became one of those things that I got obsessed with and realized that you could do like so much with type. It's like a photograph, but with letters, you know what I mean? Like you could tell a story, type can take on a personality, and that's kind of like where I fell in love with it. Mm-hmm. And then while I was in college, I became the art director of our university magazine. So it was like a weekly magazine. And like, that's kind of where I got to really flex my muscles and like learn layout design and things like that. And that's where I fell in love with editorial design. So I was like, oh, well, you know, this is where graffiti, then design, then type. And then it kind of just like, this is how I got into it. And then from there, I moved to New York. And it's funny, Jason, you had a Rochester story too. Did you go to RIT?
I went to the University of Rochester, and I noticed in your bio that you went to, or on your website, that you went to RIT.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's where I was born and went to college at RIT. But yeah, back to my career. So yeah, that's kind of where I fell in love with type. And then, you know, editorial design was such a cool canvas for type and layout that, you know, you can tell a story with just type and no images. And that's something that I really enjoyed doing. And then, you know, obviously TDC is such like a nerdy little niche thing that it's cool to have, and, you know, to be at this little Brady Bunch, pink Brady Bunch with people that like talking about type. So yeah, glad to be here.
Amazing. So quick question before we move on. Obviously you have your roots in editorial. A lot of your work is deeply rooted in editorial because of your time at the New York Times Magazine. How was that shift from doing such editorial work to working for a global like sports brand?
It was a little bit of a little tough at the, you know, a lot of growing pains at first, just because at magazines you can rely heavily on type more. So, you know, just to bring it back to type, but here at Nike, it's like you have to think about everything, all the different platforms, and, you know, I'm working with these big athletes, so we can't do anything with just type. We have to, you know what I mean? We have to shoot them. We have to use their photography. And usually the type is more of like something that's smaller, you know. Sometimes we can kind of play it up and use it more, but yeah, it's cool to kind of like think in different ways. And yeah, I mean, we have something coming out pretty soon where I was able to kind of play around with type more and have more fun with that, with the image. So it was cool.
That's great. Awesome. Okay, next, Marta. I have been a huge fan of yours for so long, and I was so thrilled when I became the chair because I was able to ask you to be a judge. So I'd love for you to introduce yourself and tell us your journey, if you're a Salon.
Oh, you're muted.
Marta, are you muted?
Yeah. Thank you, Melissa.
Yeah.
Okay, now good start. So no, I was saying that I know you also, your work also from a long time ago. So I think, well, I'm going to tell you later.
Okay.
So I started studying psychology. So I went like really far away. And then half journey, I was like, no, that's not what I want to do. I wanted to do graphic design because the girlfriend of my brother, she was a designer working with a really old school designer here in Barcelona. Like he's very, very good. Like he might be 80 now. And I saw his work and I was like, I want to do this. So I just went to college and in Elizaba in Barcelona, and I was lucky enough to be surrounded by people that in the typography field, I think they are really strong, like Andreu Balius, who won like TDC awards, I think, well, for sure, and Laura Meseguet too. And in the calligraphy field, they were also we had like really nice teachers. So my love for letters began really at the university. And I remember like having my first jobs, always trying like, I don't know, my first internship was in Germany, and I remember I was like, oh, you have to do a logo, and I would never choose a font. I would always try to do my thing. I think in part it was because I wasn't afraid, but yeah, when I started, I had no idea. So, but it was good to be like this, to just think, okay, I can do it. I will try to do it, no? And then And then, yeah, I did a lot of trainings, and then I worked in two graphic design studios in Barcelona that I liked a lot, that also were like good at typography, Turmix and Basava. And in 2008, I thought maybe it's time to start on my own, and I won the ADC award.
Yeah, Young Guns, right?
Young Guns, yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Young Guns,
Yep.
and then I thought, okay, let's go to New York and see. And yeah, New York. If you say you have this year I'm a Young Gun, then people open the doors for you, and then that's how I started having clients. And well, I think one of my dreams was like, to win a certificate of excellence.
Mhm.
And when I first got it, it was like, wow, I was so happy, because I mean, I've been in touch with the TDC since I was at not at college, no, but maybe a year or two afterwards. So yeah, for me it's an honor to be here.
So you've been aware of the TDC since college?
Yeah, since college. Yeah.
Okay, great, awesome. Your work, it seems, is really it's fascinating, because it always seems like it does a really good job at merging illustration and letterforms. It's not just letterform construction or letterform design, and it's not quite illustration. It seems to like blend these two worlds. Is that something that's like has been very intentional for you?
You know what? Because I'm not like an illustrator that I know how to draw, you know? I'm a graphic designer, and I'm not a typographer that I know all the rules, like really, really all the rules. But I try to have a lot of respect for both worlds. And I think I consider myself like the old graphic designers, like in the 70s or so, that they were like doing, I don't know, they were also like doing typefaces, like more decorative, like what I do, that it's not like something that, but yeah, I feel like more multidisciplinary, but I don't think it's like multidisciplinary. It's what a graphic designer used to be. It's just, I'm a bit old-fashioned, I think.
Yeah, no, I kind of feel similar in my work. I feel like I like to illustrate, although I'm not an illustrator. I like to make letter forms, although I don't make real like typefaces. I feel like a very traditional old school graphic designer, so I can sympathize with that. I get it. Great. That was a wonderful intro. Leland, are you on yet? I'm wondering if we got Leland on.
Yeah, I'm on. Can you see me?
We can. Okay, great. So obviously everyone here probably knows you from the great work you've done at Collins when you partnered with Brian and started making great work with him. And then of course, shifting over to Chobani and doing Class Act, wonderful work for that amazing brand. But I'll let you tell your story and then I'll shut up.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Leland Maschmeyer. I am currently the chief brand officer of Chobani. It's basically just means chief creative officer, just with a different letter. And you know, there's always kind of two parts to one's journey into the discipline. One's like when you really started kind of playing and experimenting when you were young, and then the other part is like when you got your first job or went to a specific school or something. I grew up in a small town in Georgia, and didn't really have a lot of access to a lot of kind of more refined opinions about art and design and creativity. It's, you know, it wasn't really an environment where that was really promoted or understood in a nuanced sense. So I just drew a lot and painted a lot and did pastels and chalk art. And I couldn't help, I just drew all the time. And I started deciding that, like, because I loved baseball. And so I started designing baseball team logos and stuff, because and I'm like 8 years old, because I thought, you know, I didn't like the logos, or like, well, you know, I want to come up with new ones. And then, you know, this is going to date me, I'm now the oldest person in the room, but I used to like redesign like jewel case covers for CDs and stuff for bands I liked. When I got a computer that had desktop publishing software on it, I was like, well, cool, I'm just going to use like, you know, Mac paintbrush, or not Mac, Microsoft Paintbrush and just start like making jewel case art with it and stuff. I had no idea any of this was called graphic design. I thought it was just art. And so I would do that just over and over and over again, had no formal lessons on it. I had more formal lessons on like fine art and stuff, but not knowing a broader narrative of what I was doing. The only narrative that was presented to me about what I was doing was art, and that the only path for you is to become a starving artist. And I didn't want to become a starving artist. So I ended up going to college for marketing because I thought, well, that's kind of like creative and big scale, and I don't have to like starve on stale bread to do art. And just kind of hated it. Like I love the college I went to. I had a great time.
Where did you go?
Say what?
Where did you go?
University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill.
Okay.
Michael Jordan's college.
Yeah. Baby blue.
Loved it, but was really hungering for the art side of it. And so I was still painting. I was doing watercolor and all this stuff in college, and even doing like logos and t-shirts and like I taught, like it was back in the day, like when you would teach yourself Adobe programs by buying a giant binder and just going lesson by lesson. I would buy like 6 of those and just go and like taught myself all these programs, learning how to make t-shirts and stuff for like local clubs and stuff. Ended up working in advertising for a hot stint, hated it. And during my hatred for advertising, started reading a lot and actually ended up discovering what design was with a capital D. And I was like, oh, I'm a designer, and no one ever told me this. And so I felt like I had to make up all these years for having lost my craft, not having, formal mentors and stuff like that. So I just went on like overdrive, essentially teaching myself all of this stuff. Started writing about design, started publishing my design work and stuff like that. And this is while I was still working in advertising. But stumbled upon a relationship with Brian Collins, and he and I, long story short, ended up meeting each other very casually, like both fell in love with each other. And I was 25, he was, I don't know, maybe 45 at the time, 48. And we both decided to start a new design firm with each other. So we both co-founded Collins 6 months after meeting each other. And then that kind of just set me off from there.
That's great. What was the catalyst to pivot in-house? I think a lot of designers tend to be curious about whether they should spend their time at a studio, making design work at a studio, going sort of freelance, or potentially going in-house. What was that feeling for you? Why did you make the pivot? Can you explain a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. I want to preface this because I know my words often have a lot of more weight to them than they should. But what I'm about to say is in no way a contrast between independent agencies and going in-house. It was truly just what was right for me and what I was excited about in the moment. Sure. But I was initially not interested in joining Chobani at all. But after learning a bit more about the opportunity and stuff, I was like, oh, this is actually a really interesting scenario to do something that I think has big legs to it, both from like the company and the company's ambition, but also building this idea of like an in-house agency. And this was 5 years ago. And I mean, in-house has grown so much in 5 years that it was, and still kind of is, the wild, wild west. And I was very attracted to this wild, wild west idea that nobody had figured it out. And I kind of had the arrogant attitude of like, well, I'm going to go invent the future of in-house. Just like, when we started Collins, I was 25, I had no clue what I was doing. I was like, I'm going to build a great design firm, and had no clue what that meant. And so I ended up taking it purely to test myself and to give myself a challenge that I couldn't ever have working agency side. Okay. And so it's, I've learned a ton. I screwed up a ton. I've had a lot of great successes, and it's made me a better designer overall for spending a bit of my time on the client side.
That's great. That's a great answer. Thank you, Leland. So I don't think Joyce is able to join us. And I mentioned Leandro, unfortunately, got pulled onto a job because he is in high demand and he's super talented. So we won't be joined by them. But I do see some questions popping up in the Q&A. I'm going to answer or ask one of them. And this is a question for Marta. They were asking if calligraphy was required in your specific school in Barcelona. I think you might be on mute again. Maybe.
Sorry.
Oh, good.
Yes. I think it was a whole year. Yeah, 1 year, second year. Like we did it once a week for 3 hours or so.
Okay.
And I mean, we had like a very, very good teacher, like Oriol Miró. If you don't know his work, he's amazing. Oriol Miró. And then Keith Adams, he's a bit of a weirdo because he's like not in the internet anywhere. He lives in a super small town with no electricity. Like he's like old school, but he also does like a calligraphy workshop in summer in the Alps, in the French Alps, and you can go there and it's like super hippie, like people like eat from the huerto, from the whatever. And you are doing calligraphy all day long. And I did that one summer, and this is like something really nice to see in San Antoine Lavalley if you like calligraphy.
Okay, very cool. And guys, you can keep loading up questions in here. I'll get to them eventually. I have one more, and then I'm going to ask some other questions. This question is actually for me and for Marta. It's they said, they asked, because you don't consider yourselves traditional illustrators or typographers, is it easier to let your work speak for yourself rather than explaining what you are? I think that's a super interesting question. I tend to put like a title down. I tell people I'm a designer and a typographer. But I do like the work to speak for itself. I do like, I enjoy people just kind of seeing the work for what they are and kind of ignoring the titles, just kind of enjoying if I make an identity system that is like based on letter forms. I would rather just someone enjoy that and not get caught up in like how I define myself. I don't know about you, Marta. How do you feel about that?
I'm a mess now.
Oh, we got you.
Yeah.
Oh,
Sorry. I'm a mess. Sorry. I don't know. For me, I think the most important is each project, and each project needs to speak in a different way. And I prioritize always the project. Then again, I think this is how I find the freedom, like to thinking that in every project you can do something different, like not narrowing yourself. Okay, I just do illustration, then I cannot take this other project because in this other project there's type, like, I don't know, not putting limits in this area.
Okay, very cool. So obviously everyone, you guys are all judging the communication design part of the TDC this year. I guess sort of a larger sort of like macro question I have is, how do you guys feel about, and I know this is very broad, like about the current state of design as it relates to typography, and what kind of work are you guys looking forward to seeing this year in these submissions? Pick and choose that question as you want. I'm going to toss this back over to Melissa to get your thoughts on this, and then we'll just go around and everyone can kind of give their thoughts.
Oh man, it's such a big question.
It is. So take your time, answer it how you would like. But yeah, this is a pretty big question.
I mean, I guess in terms of what I always look for, whether it's in this competition or just in general, when I'm finding people that I'm interested in working with or collaborating with, is just finding some way to have your personality come through in the work. And I know that that's kind of a spectrum in terms of what the project is. Obviously, if you're working in-house versus doing something personal, that sense of personality might be a little bit different in each thing, but I do feel like there's always the ability to kind of add your little stamp on something, even if it's still fulfilling a really specific purpose. And then I guess in terms of typography at large, I mean, I feel like social media and just the way that we share work now on such a global level has really influenced certain trends or certain things that we're seeing that maybe only used to be in a specific culture or country and now are global, and you're seeing them and absorbing them really quickly. So I'm interested to see, maybe, I think everyone sort of absorbs these things whether they want to or not. So I'm interested to see, you know, how people are interpreting them, if they can add their own new spin to things, especially within specific cultures in different countries, since I know so many different people are going to be entering. So yeah, I'm curious what you could do with that.
Okay, very cool. Yeah, this is a global competition, and I think that makes it unique. You'll see letter forms. It's mostly like Latin and extended Latin scripts that we'll be judging, but we'll see them in a bunch of different ways. So I guess I shoot this over to the same question over to Jason Sfetko. I'm curious what your kind of position, or what do you think about the current state of design and typography, and what are you looking for in these submissions this year?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of going to echo what Melissa said. It's like everything is so instant now with our phones, and you know, we're just viewing everything through this tiny little screen. So I feel like a lot of, you know, and also like trends are happening so fast, and things just kind of cycle through. So it's tough now because, you know, especially in my line of work, I used to be able to look at type in like these big, large, you know, not large, but bigger formats, like in magazines and things like that, and really appreciate them. But now that you're seeing things on phones, and people are adding animation and motion to type, I mean, it opens up a whole new possibilities too. So, you know, I mean, these things have been happening for years, but I feel like it's kind of really progressed in the past few years. It's like adding motion and things like that to type. So yeah, it definitely opens a lot of possibilities, but with the trends and things like that, it's hard to kind of stand out nowadays. I think you can easily be, you know, get sucked into those things, but you know, the more we stand out, the better it is for whoever that is. But
so you're looking for like things that are maybe more like unique and stand out in a way that doesn't feel like maybe, you know, more mass, if you will.
I think so. I mean, yeah, it's hard. It's easy to put things into like a stylistic like bucket nowadays. Like, oh, they're just doing, someone's trying to do this or doing that. So I think, yeah, the more surprised I can be by things was what I'm interested in or would be excited by.
That's exciting. Awesome. Okay, Jason Ramirez, same question. What do you feel about the current state of design and typography, and what are you looking for in these submissions?
I agree. Those are really big questions. I'm going to tackle the submission one, I think, probably first, if not only. Okay. I think type can live in so many different ways, whether it is mass or whether it's, you know, print or online, whatnot. So, and so I think I'm just looking forward to seeing how type can be used within a specific platform that makes it feel fresh, look exciting, vibrant, kind of inspiring. I mean, I'm someone who works, I'm not a good hand letterer. You'll see a lot of hand lettering and book cover design. Like, I suck. I can't do it. I've tried and it just falls flat. I either have to hire people to do it for me or just abandon it. So I fall back on digital typography a lot. So, you know, one thing I try to impress upon the team of designers I work with is, you know, if you want to use Helvetica, how can you use Helvetica in a new and a fresh way? Like, how can you either use the typeface in a fresh way or use it in a fresh way with regard to the genre of literature you're working with at the moment? So
I see.
I think, yeah, I guess I'm looking forward to seeing projects and seeing how people, I think it's hard to, there's just so much out there. I think it's hard to be 100% original. And so I think it's like taking the familiar and making it new again almost.
You know, I'm really glad you said that, because, you know, we got a question in the Q&A from, I believe is from Manny Hernandez, and he was like, you know, what is even original these days? And that's a really good point. You know, like, how are we judging? Because what is really original? There's so much out there. And it got me thinking. I'm like, yeah, I don't really know if it's a matter of originality, but maybe it's about how someone can push certain ideas to make them feel fresh or different. Is that what you're kind of getting at a little?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Whether it's ideas, whether it's, you know, the usage of, you know, how do you use Helvetica in this, like, you know, on this piece of packaging or this piece of print ephemera and whatnot. And, you know, kind of, Melissa talked about personality. Like, type has a lot of personality. So, you know, seeing type within a greater context, it's always inspiring to see work from other people and how they kind of, you know, take type and take the personality of that type and imbue it into the project and you know,
yeah,
create a whole new flavor.
Yeah, I think that's great. That's a really good answer. I'm going to kick this over to Marta. What do you, maybe we just go with, what are you looking for in these submissions this year?
I was thinking like yesterday, because I like to look always at the annuals, and I thought, how will look this year? Because this year is special, right? We've all been locked down, and I don't know how it will affect, like, if we will see this reflected in the annual, like at the end, no? That if everything will be, in the book, like in the results, no? In the in the selection, like if it will really be more digital or not, like, will we see it or not? I was thinking that. But as well, I think we will see a lot of good work, that's for sure. I don't know. I think, like, I don't know, good. It's always like, I always think like of Poran, that he says like, don't try to be original, try to be good. And then I think like good work, originality sometimes comes afterwards, but for me, it will be more important to see good work than, I don't know.
Okay.
Originality, I also think it's overrated. I think what Melissa said about the personality is more, it's more it.
Okay, that's great. That's great. What about you, Leland? What are you looking to see, looking to see something that's really going to stand out to you?
I want to see really fucked up work that I don't know if it's good or bad.
That's really great. Like something that sort of questions your idea of what good is.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you know, over the years of doing lots of different things in design, I've kind of come to this personal philosophy, and Brian Collins shares it with me as well, which is, if you immediately like something, it means you've seen it before. It's a familiar pattern. You can immediately justify why it's great. It's things that, when you look at it, you don't know what to think of it, are the things that you should stick with longer and try to figure out what to do with, because there's a tension in there, or there's something unresolved in it that's making you linger a little longer and making you uncomfortable. And it's not to say that's the only good type of design and typography. Like, there's tons of stuff that I love seeing and stuff that I want to see, but the stuff that I really cherish my exposure to are the people who present me something and I'm like, I have no idea what to think of this thing. There's things that I love about it, and there are things that, like, I don't get about it. And that, for me, that tension, that friction is me learning, and it's me expanding my visual vocabulary.
I think that's really exciting and wonderful to hear. I agree. I often get most excited by things that make me question, like, my own, like, preconceived notions of what is good work, but I like it. It's something that you're like, I don't know why I like this. It's weird.
Like, I don't know if I should say that I like it, because then people might think I'm a terrible designer and have terrible. I'm going to stay quiet for a little while until I feel more validated.
Totally.
That's the feeling I like having.
It's a good feeling. That's a really great answer. We're getting a bunch of questions in the Q&A. I'm going to go through one of them. Brett McKenzie. Hey, Brett. An old friend of mine. He asked to everyone. So I'm going to go down the list again. What are the biggest creative and professional lessons that this crazy 2020 year has taught you? And that will carry into 2021 and beyond. That's a big question, but I think it's a very timely and thoughtful question. Leland, since we're talking, I'm just going to throw it right back at you. Lessons that you're going to carry from last year to this year and beyond.
God, it's such a hard one. I think so many of the lessons were not formal creative lessons. They're more about process lessons, because I think for me personally, it's very easy to have my entire world shrink down into this one thing that I'm trying to design or crack or figure out. And when your world shrinks like that, it creates a lot of pressure, and it makes this little thing that you're trying to solve feel like the biggest problem and the biggest weight in the world. And I think one of the, and I'm a workaholic, so I'm very guilty of doing that a lot. So one of the things that I've learned is you got to have, as part of your process, an ability to pull out and disconnect. Otherwise, all these little things are going to start piling up and feeling overwhelming.
Okay.
I've been terrible at that in the history, so I needed to get better.
Okay, that's great. That's really great advice. Melissa, lessons, shoot.
I mean, maybe this is kind of a controversial thing in this specific context, but I think with everything that happened this past year, I was just like, design doesn't need to be so important. There is a lot of design that is very useful and necessary. But I mean, I think there's something about just seeing so many like Instagram carousels of like what to do in this horrible life moment that kind of just made me feel like the things that I'm working on primarily, at least before 2020, are, I think, about more levity and bringing, these beautiful, interesting images into the world. I'm not really working on, signage in the White House or something that is like really, really utilitarian or really useful. And I think embracing some of that lightness going forward for me personally has been something that I'm trying to bring into the new year, which also I think brings some flexibility to like make more weird work or make more things that aren't necessarily what I would originally think of as being good work, and just experiment a bit more and be loose and be flexible.
That's wonderful. That's really great advice. Okay, Jason Ramirez, lessons from 2020 that you bring in with you. What do you got?
I agree with both Melissa and Leland. For me, it is the biggest challenge and lesson has been with regard to process. Given that I create pieces of printed material, we had to kind of reevaluate how to do that in so many different ways, whether it's, we can no longer print things out. So we're designing on a computer and don't really have a good frame of reference for how big type is or difficulty color correcting. And so it's been able to move through these challenges with as much kind of nimbleness and flexibility and patience as possible. Understanding that there will be mistakes made, whether it's me or people on my team, and just trying to learn from those and move forward. One of my biggest challenges has been disconnecting. I've been horrible at it. So much so that like working long days and into the night, like made my body just achy. So that's something I really got to work on going forward, because I'm going to be at home in this little nook for quite a while, I feel like. So yeah, it's been a challenging year for me in terms of process and creativity. And I think there was so much kind of process-oriented challenges, particularly the first half of the pandemic, that kind of took away from my ability to feel comfortable designing or even find the time to design as much as I wanted to. So it's been an interesting year. So
Okay.
I hope to learn from my challenges and my mistakes for 2021.
Yeah, that's great. Jason Sfetko, same question. Go.
Yeah, I agree with all you guys. I mean, more life lessons have come out of this, I feel like, rather than like design lessons. But, you know, it's just things everyone's saying. It's unprecedented time. So you have to come up with unprecedented ideas. And like, how do we push things, you know, push things out of the norm, break out of our old habits? That's kind of what I've been trying to learn through this is like, you know, we've been having to do photo shoots through Zoom and things like that. It's just like learning new ways of doing things. And, you know, how can we learn from them? And like, you know, maybe some of these things are better ways of doing things too. So, you know, it's just for me, it's been like breaking out of old habits and trying new things and, you know, trying to take that into my work too. So
I just want to bust in. I think one of the best things that's happened in the pandemic for me has been kind of meeting these challenges and understanding that the way you did things yesterday needs to change for today and tomorrow. And in fact, it has, you know, after a period of time, created the new ways have become better ways of doing things in some respects. So, you know, there have been new efficiencies that I think have come out of this. At least for me, which I'm grateful for.
That's great. Yeah, awesome. Marta, lessons from 2020 moving into 2021. It could be anything.
Yeah. No, I think that more personal than professional, but for me, it has been also personally like a really tough year. Besides COVID, it's been like a bomb, like a super hard year. And it's been like the first time that I've been really having troubles like focusing on my work, and I've realized that really working is like a safe place for me. This year I've seen it more than ever, that when you cannot can focus, it's difficult. So I'm trying now to be able to focus again. I'm getting at it, but I'm still not like. So the lesson, I don't know, try to focus. I don't know.
That's really good. That's really great. I think my lesson will be to try not to doom scroll terrible news for hours and absorb like negative shit for like hours. Because, you know, this world has been so crazy over the past year. I'll scroll on Twitter or CNN and just take in negativity over and over and over again. I'm trying.
Yeah.
Yesterday didn't help, but I'm trying not to do that. But it's hard.
I guess.
Yeah. Okay. I have a question here for Leland. It says, why did you hate working in advertising? And what's your opinion has your opinion on the industry changed since you went in-house?
It's a great question. So the funny thing is, I actually love advertising, really good advertising. It was the industry and the way of working that was deeply frustrating to me. And I can pinpoint an exact moment in my experience where I was like, I'm done. The frustration that I had working in the industry was that it was, at least in the agency that I was working in, it was very mechanical. It was like a factory production line where there's all this pontificating about like innovation and great thinking and, you know, cutting edge creativity, but we were pumping out the same thing over and over again. And I was working at not a small local agency, I was working at a national agency. And so that dissonance between the language we use to talk about ourselves and the reality drove me nuts. And there was one moment where I was presenting an idea to our client that this is like 2004. And if I were to describe the idea to you today, you'd be like, yeah, that's a cool idea. Like lots of companies do that. But in 2004, there wasn't a lot of companies doing that. And, a lot of people in the company got excited about what I was presenting. And it was like this fully integrated campaign idea and stuff. And then the client looked at me and goes, okay, but where's my TV ad? And I was like, okay, I'm done working in this industry. Because there, at least in the context that I was in, we were not set up to do great work. I literally had a client who told me she didn't want to do great work. She wanted good enough work. And I was like, I can't exist in this. And, you know, there were some other things that just kind of really turned me off about the industry or that particular agency that I was in. But look, great advertising is beautiful. And part of what I really love about people who hate the industries they work in is that they hate the industries they work in because they see so much potential that's being squandered. And it's typically those people who care the most about their industry. They're just not happy with where it is. So I tend to be attracted to those types of people, whether they're in design or advertising and stuff like that, because there's incredible creative potential in all these industries. It's just this sediment and inertia and legacy structures that aren't evolving that prevent great work from being done. So it's not the discipline that I dislike. It is the industry. It is the business structures of the industry or the norms of the industry that I felt stymied what I wanted to do.
I see. Yeah, I think a lot of people, even within advertising, I've worked at agencies before, feel similar. They feel similar because the process and the bureaucracy, and sometimes working with such great talent, and you get to you see how capable and exciting people are when they come to work, and how they get beaten up and sort of like snuffed out over the meetings and the years, and the clients who are scared to take some steps with them. It takes a toll on your soul, I think.
But I will say this, as much as I did not like working in the industry, I am very thankful I worked in it, because it is a big industry that has scaled up the business of creativity. And I learned a ton about running a creative company. I learned a ton about the business language around creativity and what clients ask for and how you connect creativity to business and things like that, so that you can do incredible things at incredible scale. So I'm very thankful of my time there. It just was not something that I wanted to stay doing for the rest of my career.
I see. Good. That's a great answer. Thank you. I have another question in here. I'm just going to grab one of these. Okay. Question for all. What challenges have you encountered when your designer experience is within one discipline, for example, editorial, but you want to find work maybe in another discipline, like branding, for instance? So I guess this person's really curious about being sort of typecasted or pigeonholed. I think Jason, Svetko, you're probably really good at sort of answering this question, because you made a pretty significant pivot from editorial to branding sports.
Yeah. No, I was going to say, oh, that sounds like me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of why I did it. I didn't want to get pigeonholed in one thing. And, for other reasons too, personal reasons. We just had a child, and we were in New York for 10 years. So we were kind of getting burnout, but I kind of wanted to stretch myself. I wanted to see what if my design skills could lean into other areas of design. And, Nike seemed like one of those places that respects design, and, it's part of their brand. So, it felt like a cool place to go and try and do that. But for me, I mean, basically, you kind of have to start, I don't know. I was networking a lot with other people. I hate to say it's about meeting people, but that's how it was for me. I met the right people at the right time. The person who hired me was interested in the New York Times and the work, the design that was happening there. So I kind of used that as a stepping stone. But yeah, I mean, I guess advice for other designers would be, you might have to take on those freelance projects that are in those other fields that you want to get into. You have to show that you can, that you can do that in those other areas too. So the more you can visually do that rather than just kind of explaining it is always a good thing.
That's great. Thank you. I agree. I think, in order to get hired for something, it helps to show people that you can do it. I know that's like the silliest thing. Everyone's heard it over and over and over again, but you're not going to get hired to do something if you can't demonstrate your ability to do it.
And I know, well, sorry to go back. One more quick thing on that is like, obviously as a designer, and a lot of my older portfolio work showed that I could do like layout designs, but it was so niche. And it's sometimes when I was meeting with other creative directors at like agencies or studios or places like that, it was hard for them to kind of see that work extending, throughout a whole campaign or something like in other different platforms and things like that. So if you have work that you can kind of extend or, not just one idea, make it work for like other different things, I think that's always good too for people to see it,
Yeah.
the different the ways that things can be used.
That's great. Thank you, Jason. Marta, I feel like this is a good also question for you, because I think you've done a good job at sort of avoiding being typecast. Was it a deliberate decision to like do all these different things like illustrative typography, illustration, like all this stuff to avoid being typecast, or were they deliberate decisions or no? I think you might be on mute again.
Sorry. No, I think, yeah. No, it was deliberate. Like when I want to do something, I do it. This is what Jason said, no? Like, for example, like in 2014, I began to be interested in 3D. Then I learned cinema 4D, and then I was invited for a project, typical collaboration project, and it's the moment to do this kind of other work that no one has seen from you because it's a new thing for you, and then you do it. But the fact that you haven't had a client that hasn't asked you for it doesn't mean that you're not able to do it.
Sure.
You have to show it, just that.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's easy to like demonstrate you can do it, and it kind of gives people an easy way to sort of hire you because you've demonstrated your ability to do that specific thing. Melissa, you've pivoted from Etsy to doing a lot of work now that seems like it's in the editorial space because you shoot stuff and you make these sets and then you incorporate typography. Was that a space you wanted to go in? Did you feel like Etsy was typecasting you? How did that work for you?
I think it kind of evolved naturally when I was working at Etsy and I would be tasked with doing a seasonal campaign or something like that. I was always pushing for concepts that involve something tactile or something photographic. And in the beginning, it made sense for Etsy because it was meant to sort of be this aspirational thing that we were sharing with other Etsy sellers who are also very kind of tactile people and like that stuff. So it sort of worked in the beginning, and that was some of my first work there. And I actually worked with Nicole then too, was creating tactile typography and this sort of like paper crafted floral scene that was shot and used as a seasonal campaign, but also as like some print designs and then reference for a mural at certain events. So, I mean, that was one of my first projects there that I was like really excited about. And that was probably a couple years into working at Etsy. So I kept pushing for work that was similar to that, where we were pitching these things that were photographic. And then I would just say, well, I'll save you guys money by making it myself or working with Nicole, and we'll make it in the office and like you won't even have to worry about it. And so that was a great way of selling it to my team, and them giving us the resources to do it. So I think if you have the backing of a company and you want to try something, it's great to have someone else pay for it. So I would recommend that.
Okay.
And then I guess as the company grew, it wasn't as possible to do things in that way anymore, just because it needed to scale to so many different places and countries and languages. So I just sort of kept doing that on my own and finding other people that had similar interests to me to collaborate with, and really just putting that out there. I think no matter what you call yourself, people are just going to see your work and they're going to decide what you are. So I think I've changed my title independently like 5 different times, and it doesn't matter because people just come to me anyway and they're like, oh, you do brand design. I'm like, not really anymore, but sure. Or lettering. I was like, maybe a little bit before, but okay.
Right.
So whatever you put out there is what they'll hire you for. And I think it kind of helps to sometimes present independent portfolios just based on whatever specific thing whatever job you're trying to get, just really tailored to that.
Yeah, I think that's great. Jason Ramirez, you've spent a lot of your time in book publishing world and also some branding work, but do you feel like being sort of pigeonholed, or do you feel like you're sort of typecast, or if you are, was that deliberate?
You know, I would probably say I probably do feel a bit typecast, but it is probably likely more deliberate than not. I don't think I've really put myself out there much to do much beyond publishing. I'm pretty content, but that's not to say I wouldn't. But I will say that when I was in San Francisco and I worked for a real estate company, and I worked in HR as an admin assistant. And that was when I first started really thinking about design as a career, realizing that it was design with a D and it could be a career. And my company had an education reimbursement program. So if I could demonstrate that by taking Photoshop, I can apply that to the work I was doing in HR for a real estate company, they were gladly to pay for it. So, and that's what I ended up doing for several years, was taking continuing education until I was able to, you know, create enough things to kind of help me make the next move I needed, which was, oddly enough, at the same real estate company when they decided they wanted to create their first in-house marketing department. So that was an opportunity where, you know, I had taken these courses over a few years in desktop publishing, I guess is what it was called at the time, where I had pieces that I had made that I could present, you know, in pursuit of, you know, the position I was seeking.
Right.
So
Yeah.
somewhat similar, but I think it kind of dovetails with what others have said, in that, you know, you do kind of have to pursue it, and you know,
if you build it, they will come, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Someone is specifically asking to hear Leland's point on this specific question. So I'm going to throw it over to Leland. If he's still there.
Yeah, I'm still here. Sorry, muting.
Right.
Sorry, what was the question again?
That's right. So the question was, like, let's say you work in like one specific sector of design, editorial, for instance, and you want to do work in branding, let's say. I mean, you're being typecasted. How easy or how hard is it for someone to pivot almost, or to start to take on new roles within the design world? I mean, I think Chobani is really interesting because you guys do packaging and you do campaigns and you do motion. You do sort of a lot within the realm of design. So I think there's a few people here that are very interested in getting your sort of take on it.
Yeah, I think I'm going to answer that question from the lens of Collins and being on the agency side, because I think that's probably a more relevant lens, because internally they're like, fine, here, you do it.
Okay.
But yeah, this was something we always really struggled with at Collins, because everyone wants to pigeonhole you into a very specific box. And we could do and did lots of different stuff, but very early on, we just had people coming to us for the exact same stuff. The reason for that is because there's the perception of less risk, that, you know, a lot of these clients have X amount of budget, they have a problem that a company like yours could possibly solve, and they want to know that they're going to make the right choice. So if you've done something that they want, they're more likely to give you that money. So, you know, for one, it's just important to understand that, so that when you're actually talking to clients, you can actually understand that what they're trying to do is mitigate risk and mitigate failure, because they don't know. Like they know as much about picking agencies and illustrators and typographers and stuff as most people do about picking a dentist. Like they don't have the language or the knowledge to make critical choices. So they try to pick a safe choice or a reassuring choice, and that comes through the work. So whenever you're talking with a client, it's really important to not only do what other people on this call said of like show side work, small projects, personal work that you've done to show that you can do it, but also to, through the dialogue, reassure them that you understand their problem and that you can bring a unique perspective and potential solution to that problem. And that's how we always approached it with Collins. If we didn't have a certain scope of kind of work that somebody was trying to buy, we always ended up focusing on the problem that they were trying to solve. And we often ended up winning new types of work because we were having new and different kinds of conversations with them about their problem than most other agencies were. So it's really important to know that it's both a portfolio challenge and a dialogue challenge when you're trying to expand your scope of work and perception.
Yeah, that's great advice. Thank you, Leland. I have another question here for the whole gang, for everybody, which is actually a really good one because it goes back to like what we'll be doing in the next couple of weeks, which will be judging work, right? Are there projects that you've worked on or that someone has worked on that you feel is amazing typographically? So the type is wonderful, but you're really not too keen on the whole sort of like the surrounding imagery, for instance, or what goes along with the typography. They're wondering, will you judge the type by itself, or will you be looking at an entire whole package? I'm going to kick this one over to Melissa to start, and we'll go from there.
I mean, I think if it's being presented as a final product, then the type and the environment that it lives in is the communication design piece. And even if I really like the type, I would still be looking at it from the lens of the project as a whole and how it's solving the problem. So I don't know if, I can't think of a specific instance where pulling that out, unless we were judging, I guess, the specific typeface design, which I don't think is.
Right. Which we're not doing, no.
So it's communication design, so I would judge the whole piece.
Yeah, that makes sense. I would have to agree with that. Jason Ramirez, what do you think?
I agree, cohesive package.
Yeah. I think we're probably going to get a unanimous on this one, but I'll go around the house. Marta, how do you feel about that?
Yeah. I mean, it's part of a big machine. No, it's needs to be, everything goes together.
I agree. Okay, Leland.
The whole bag.
The whole bag.
Everything.
Yeah. And Jason.
Yeah, ditto.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I agree. I think, the truth is, if the typography isn't helping or supportive of feels like integrated in such a way that the whole package isn't working, then something's amiss. So it's not going to be worthy of an award. Okay. So we have another question here for Leland in there, and it's about working in-house. It says, Leland, working in-house, did you find that you had to educate your colleagues about the industry, or did you get a lot of trust at Chobani? Or was there sort of, or was there a dynamic difference? Meaning, like, was there a learning curve that you had to like teach your internal team at Chobani?
Yes, but I would also say that it was a mutual learning curve. I had to learn a ton about what it really meant to run a company. And I will tell you, it is a lot more than people on the agency side think. It's really tough. So we both approached it from a perspective of we were going to be on a learning journey with each other. I needed stuff, they needed to learn stuff. But I think the most important thing there was a passion and openness for learning on both sides. That doesn't mean that there wasn't friction. That doesn't mean that there wasn't kind of standoffs about certain things, but that's all a natural part of trying to figure out how to work at. I wanted them to be champions of what we were doing. And so that meant that I had to take a teaching mentality rather than a telling mentality. I think in the creative industry, there's so much of an attitude of like brute force of just trying to push stuff through. And that's like perceived as like the heroic thing to do, that, oh my God, you sold that in. How did you sell that in? I just personally don't believe in that. As long as a person is maintaining the sense of passion and openness and enthusiasm to what we're doing, I will spend all the time in the world helping those people see the world the way that I do. Doesn't mean I expect them to convert to my view of the world. It just means I want them to have some empathy, if not sympathy, for why I'm bringing things to the table or why I'm challenging in a certain way. And I would expect the same thing of them. And I think that just ultimately creates a better working relationship.
Okay, great. That's awesome. And I have two more questions, and I think then we'll slowly start like wrapping up. I think one of the questions here is for Jason, Sfetko, and you, Leland. What are you guys looking for? I guess we can give this to everyone, but what are you looking for in designers that you're going to hire? Like, what are you looking for?
I guess I can start. Yeah, I mean, I'm not really the one responsible for hiring at Nike, but and I don't know if they mean more internal or like someone that we would partner with, like a vendor, but I guess I'll start with someone that we would hire internally. Basically, someone who's passionate about what they're doing. Like, if you're hungry, passionate, and, you know, obviously if you're someone I would want to work with every day and spend more time with in my family, like, yeah, then that just be yourself. And, you know, I think someone who's like a Swiss Army knife is good to have on a team always, like someone who's, you know, they're good in Photoshop, they're good with type, they're good with layouts. That those type of people are always more valuable in crunch time than, you know, someone who's just focused on one thing.
That's interesting. That's interesting. Melissa, when you're like working, I know you do a lot yourself, but when you work maybe at ST or other places, what were you looking for when like you're the hiring?
I guess I would speak to like a hypothetical hire maybe with what I'm doing now, but I would just look for people. Well, I'll echo what Jason said, someone who seems like I'm able to work with, who's excited and passionate about what they're doing, but also someone who just has skills that I don't have. So I think finding the gaps, maybe whether it's the person that's hiring you that's telling you that they have them, or even just looking through the work and saying, oh, I could, you know, enhance this here or there. So for me, you know, I do some lettering, but I don't know how to make typefaces. So that would be something that I'm always wondering, oh, I wish someone could help with this or could advise with this. I'm not really great with motion. And so that's something that I'm always looking for with partners. So yeah.
Great. Jason Ramirez, I know that you probably work with maybe illustrators or photographers from time to time. What are you looking for when I know there's like a brief that you're working on, you have an idea, but what are you looking for when you're trying to hire someone?
I mean, a lot of, you know, clearly a lot of it is their craft and what they produce and how it might suit the particular project, but also, you know, for instance, with regard to designers that we may commission, you know, the thought behind their work as well. So I would say, you know, thought, concept, and craft are probably the two main things I look for, and just kind of how that fits within the specific genre of the book.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I mean, concept and craft are like the two major pillars for like any good designer, right? So I agree.
But I will add that working with someone that you know is going to be easy to work with, especially after maybe 2, 3, 4 rounds of, you know, comps, is always a big plus. So
yeah, I mean, that's true. You know, at Sunday afternoon, I have to say I'm super lucky that everyone is amazing to work with. They're just good humans that I don't mind spending an extraordinary amount of time with. So I agree. I have one like last sort of question, then I'll let you guys all go. You've been amazing. This is so the same question goes for you, Leland, but this also is a second part to that question about what you're looking for when you're hiring. So the question is, what are you looking for when you're hiring someone? But was there a different criteria from agency to in-house when you're hiring?
Yeah, for the second part of the question, it's easier. There's no difference.
Okay.
I want to work with really talented people, which then blends into the first part of the question. Is there's kind of two parts to it, and obviously it always depends on the role and stuff, but it's kind of like a general rule of thumb. It's similar to Melissa. I really like hiring people who are way more talented than me. I feel very strongly in the idea of being the dumbest person in the room or the least talented person in the room. I get excited by how much better everyone I work with is than me at other stuff. But on a more specific level, that's, I think, relatable to the people on this call, I really look for, within creative talent, people who have things to them, you call them X factors, that I can't teach. So for instance, people who have fine art backgrounds and have a real strong sense of color and rhythm in their compositions, like, it's really hard to teach that. And so there's lots of things I can teach people, but if you don't have a sense of rhythm, if you don't have a sense of scale and proportion, you don't have a sense of eye for color and stuff, those are things that separate, the difference between B+ work and A+ work, or A- work and A+ work. And that's what I'm really looking for. It doesn't mean that's the only reason I hire people, but it's that special little thing that I'm looking for as I look through portfolios and speak with people.
That's great. That's great. We are about 10 minutes to closing, so I just wanted to personally thank all of you to agreeing to be judges, because I think you're all amazing, and I'm inspired by each and every one of you. But even more so, to take your time and just chat and nerd out with me around design and typography. I'm looking forward to seeing the work that comes in and seeing what you guys select as this year's best, world's best typography. Thank you for spending your time with me and everyone else that jumped in the call. Thanks for asking questions. And
Juan,
I know it's late.
Juan Carlos, I just
yeah.
want to remind everyone that the deadline is tomorrow.
Oh, yeah.
And, send your work in if you want these wonderful judges to see it. And if you want the extended deadlines, February 5th, there are extra fees, but get your work in so these wonderful people can see it.
Yes, get it in now.
Thank you. I look forward to working with everybody.
Yeah. Take care, guys. Thank you so much. Have a good night.